The trail ran along the top of the ravine like a scar, bare stone on one side and nothing on the other. The wind came up from below in cold pulls, carrying the smell of wet rock and the long drop. He had walked this trail a dozen times, and it had never offered him anything except a shorter path to where he was going. Below was a long way down. Below was rock. The stone at the base was loose and pale, the kind that shifts when you land on it and doesn't give you anything back. He heard it before he saw it. Not a voice, not a cry for help. Just the sound of something that had stopped moving the way it should, a small, wrong thing in the air, and his feet slowed before he understood why. He went to the edge and looked over. She was there. Her fingers were on the lip of the stone, the top joints pale with effort. Her body hung below. At some point, she had lost the foothold she had been using. There was only the grip now, the fingers on the stone, and those were going. She was large, larger than anyone he had encountered on this trail or any other, and the size of her meant nothing now. Her forearms had slowed in the way things slow when they are past asking for more. The small adjustments of her grip were coming harder and further apart, like something winding down. She was not looking up. He stood at the edge. He looked at her. He knew what she was. He knew what a man did and did not do in a world like this one, for a person like her. He looked once down the trail. Then he lay down flat at the edge, stomach against the stone. He reached back with his feet and found the root of a low shrub growing from a crack in the rock, thin. Better than nothing. He pressed his heels behind it until he felt it hold. He got his center low. Then he reached both arms over. "Here," he said. She did not look up immediately. Then she did. What crossed her face was not gratitude, not relief. Something older and quieter. The expression of someone who had run out of options and found one more. Her hands found his wrists. He felt her weight come onto him like something dropped, immediate and total. His feet pressed hard against the root. He could not pull, not a body this size, not over open air. He held on. She climbed. She was doing the work. He was just the fixed point she was climbing toward. The thing in a place where there was nothing else to hold. The root creaked behind his heels, and he did not move. His shoulder burned. She pulled herself up slowly, the way things move when they have passed their own limit, and then her elbow cleared the stone, then her shoulder, and then she was up, both of them on the rock, she on her hands and knees, he on his back. Neither of them spoke. He did not move, and neither did she. Below, far below, was the scree. Loose, pale stone at the base of the cliff, angular and still and a long way down. He did not look at it. She looked at her own hands. They were not moving quickly. They were barely moving at all. That stillness held for a while. He did not know what came next. He did not know what she would do or what he would say. An hour ago, he would not have predicted he was still the kind of man who would do what he had just done. What neither of them could have known, lying there on the stone above the long drop, was what the winter still had to say about it. His name was not important yet. What mattered was the homestead, 2 hours west along the ridge, down off the high trail and through the pines, and what the homestead no longer held. There had been a woman. She had been gone 2 years and 3 months, not that he was still counting, not exactly. The counting had stopped, but the knowledge had not. It was there in the mornings when he woke to a house that sounded different than it used to. It was there in the evenings when the fire was only for him, and in the way the rooms had slowly arranged themselves around a single person without either of them deciding it. He had learned to live inside that knowledge, the way a man learns to live inside a house with a low beam, carefully at first, and after a while without thinking. The homestead didn't feel abandoned. That was what people sometimes said about places where someone had gone, that they felt empty after. This one did not. It felt exactly the right size for one person now, which was its own kind of problem. The homestead was his, clear and paid for. 11 years on that ground. He had built most of what stood on it with his own hands and repaired the rest more times than he could count. He could fix fences. He could patch a roof. He could read a winter sky and know what it intended. He could put up a wall with bad wood and make it hold. He could keep livestock through a hard season and bring most of them through the other side. He could do most things that needed doing on a piece of ground a person was trying to keep. And he had been trying to keep this one for a long time. 7 years of it without her. The trail above the ravine was a supply route. There was a trading post a half-day's walk east where he picked up what the homestead could not produce. He made the trip 4 times a year, sometimes 3. He knew this trail well enough to walk it in low light, knew where the stone went slick after rain, knew where the ledge narrowed. He had walked it that morning with a pack on his back and a list in his head, and nothing unusual on his mind. He had not expected to find anyone at the edge. He stood there now, not far from where it had happened. The orc was sitting on the stone, a dozen feet away, with her knees pulled up and her arms resting across them. She made the rock look like a smaller thing. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the place where the stone ended and the air began. The way a person looks at a thing that came very close to being the last thing they saw. Her hands were in her lap. They were still. When she shifted them, the movement was slow, the muscles not yet done with what they had just asked of themselves. He picked up the pack he had set down before he lay at the edge. He shouldered it. He looked at her once. "Can you walk?" he said. She did not answer. He did not ask again. He turned and started back down the trail toward the homestead. He did not tell her to come. He did not tell her not to. He walked at a regular pace, not fast, not slow, the way a man walks when he is not waiting for anything in particular. He did not look back. She was there when he got home. He had not looked back on the trail. He had not slowed his pace. He came down off the ridge and through the pines and into the yard, and she was standing outside the fence, watching him come. He did not stop. He carried the pack to the storage shed, set it inside, and came back out. He looked at her once. Then he went to the water trough along the south wall, which had developed a slow leak the week before and needed repacking at the base. The homestead was not much to look at, and it did not pretend to be. The main house was low, stone and timber, with a roof that needed tending at the east corner. There was a small barn, a storage shed, 2 pens for the livestock, a kitchen garden against the south wall, mostly bare with the season turning. Tools hung on the shed wall in a fixed order, each one in its place. The fences showed the work of many repairs, some old and some recent, all of them tight. The yard was clean. He had kept it a long time, and it showed. Not neglect. The wear of actual use, of a thing worked hard and kept going. She was taller than the fence post nearest her. That was the first thing a person would notice, standing where he stood. She was grey-green in the way of her kind, with the broad-shouldered weight of something built for long work. Large, truly large. The kind of large that made the yard feel like a closer thing. She was not threatening anyone. She was standing, watching him, with her arms at her sides and her hands open, in the way of a person who wants it known that their hands are empty. He worked the clay into the base of the trough and pressed it smooth. She stayed at the fence, He washed his hands and dried them on his trousers. Then he went inside and came back with a cup of water and a piece of bread, which he set on the top rail of the fence, without making anything of it, without looking at her directly, and went back to the east corner of the roof to pull the damaged shingles. She did not come to the rail right away. She watched him climb. After a while, she took the water. After a longer while, she took the bread. He did not watch her while he worked. He did not need to. He knew she was there the same way he knew where the tools were, by a kind of peripheral accounting that did not require attention. The afternoon went that way. He worked. She stood or sat at the fence and watched him. The property was quiet, a few birds in the pines, and then not even those. Neither of them spoke. He came down when the light started going and found her sitting against the fence post with her knees up and her arms across them, the same way she had been sitting on the cliff. He walked past her to the door. "One night," he said. "After that, we'll see." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "One night." He went inside. The fire burned down on its own. The house was quiet in the way it had been quiet for 2 years, the same square of silence around a single person. He had learned to live inside that. He banked the coals before bed. By the time full dark came, she had moved along the outside wall to the corner nearest the tree line, where she could see both the yard and the pines. He did not go out to tell her to do otherwise. In the morning, she was still there. The first day was the same as the morning before. He worked. She watched from her place at the fence line, patient and still, not crowding the yard. He spent the morning digging a drainage channel along the north side of the barn where water had been pooling after rain. The soil was rocky below the topsoil and came up in chunks rather than shovelfuls. It was slow work, hard work, and he did not hurry it. She did not offer to help, and he did not ask her to. In the middle of the afternoon, he left a portion of food on the top rail of the fence by the post nearest the house, bread and a cut of dried meat. He set it down without ceremony and walked back toward the barn. When he came out again, the rail was empty. He did not comment on it. She had taken it. That was enough. The second day he checked the yard at first light. She was gone. He noted this the way he noted the weather, without deciding what it meant, and went about his work. He spent the morning on the south gate, which had been pulling loose at the upper hinge for 2 seasons. By late afternoon the gate was tight, and she was back, standing at the fence post, watching him walk the property to check what he had done. He did not ask where she had gone. He left food on the rail and went inside. The nights were cold. He could hear the wind off the ridge from inside the house. He did not know what she did out there in the dark, whether she slept or only watched, but she was at her place each morning when the light came. The third morning he nodded once when he opened the door and saw her, not expecting an answer. He got to work. He needed to reset the corner post on the east side of the livestock pen. It had heaved in the frost, and now it listed, and the whole run of fence pulled with it. He had dug out the base and had the stone ready and knew what the job required. He could not hold the post upright and pack the stone in around it at the same time. Not alone. He was kneeling at the base considering this when her shadow crossed the ground. She went to the post without being asked, and took it in both hands and held it plumb. No question, no look to him for direction. He packed the stone, tamped it down, packed again. She held through all of it. When the stone was set, he smoothed the earth around the base and stood. "Good," he said. She let go and moved back. The post stood straight. The fence ran even with the rest of the line. That evening he sat on the step outside the front door and watched the light go. He had a ring in his pocket, a plain band of dark metal. He took it out and turned it in his fingers, looked at it, set it on the step beside him and sat with it there, looking at the pines, before he picked it up again and put it away. He did not know she was watching. She was at the far corner of the building, in the shadow near the tree line. She saw what he did with the ring. She did not move. She said nothing. She watched the light fail the rest of the way, and then she did not watch anything at all. On the fourth day, he found the problem he had been putting off. There was a stone in the west field, a large one, half the size of a wagon wheel, that had always been there and had always been a nuisance. It sat in the middle of the section he used for the kitchen garden's overflow, and every spring he worked around it. He had decided this year he would move it. He had put off moving it, because moving it alone was not possible. The stone was old and pale, and sunk into the ground to a depth he had not been able to determine. He had tried to break it with a pickaxe the previous winter, and had chipped the surface, and gotten nothing else for his trouble. He went back to the stone that morning with a long iron pry bar. The ground around the base had been frozen and thawed so many times it was packed like mortar. He worked the bar under the near edge and levered. The stone moved perhaps a hand's width, and settled back when he let up. He adjusted his angle and tried again. The same. He was down in the dirt with his shoulder behind the bar when she came across the field toward him. She looked at the stone. She looked at him. She did not say anything. She put her hands on the stone and pushed. It moved. Not all at once, not in a single heave, but steadily, the way something moves when enough force is finally applied. She walked it forward, hands shifting as it rolled, the ground pressing up in a small ridge before it. She brought it to the edge of the field where the soil was thin and it would not matter. She set it down. She looked at her hands, and then she looked at the next thing, which was a section of the border fence that had been leaning for a week. She did not look at him. He stood up. He knocked the dirt off his trousers and went back to the field. He did not say anything about the stone. The fourth and fifth days went that way. He worked. She worked. Not always together, not on the same task, but the rhythm of the property had changed. She knew where he kept the tools now, and if one of them was pulling a loose board, the other would hold the post. It was not organized. It was just what made the task possible. The weather was shifting. The mornings had grown colder by a degree or two each day, the kind of change that was not dramatic, but that added up. He began leaving the water containers covered overnight. She began banking the outdoor fire pit before dark, without being told. On the fifth evening they were rehanging the barn door. The door was heavy timber, warped at the top edge from 2 seasons of weather. He needed it held at the right angle while the hinge pin cleared the socket, a degree off in either direction, and the pin would not seat. He showed her what needed holding, and she held it. And when he showed her where the pin needed to go, she shifted the door until the holes lined up. He drove the pin. She took the door's weight as it settled on the hinge. He had stood at the edge of the cliff and held still while she climbed. She had done the work. He had been the fixed point. Here it was the same. She provided the weight and the steadiness, and he did the fine work. The same arrangement, different direction. She came inside without asking. He was at the table with what remained of his supper when he heard the door open behind him. He did not turn around. She crossed the room and sat on the floor near the fire, not at the table, not in the chair. He could hear her settle. He did not look up. The fire was down to coals. She picked a piece of wood from the pile near the wall and set it on without asking. The coals took it. The light shifted and grew. He watched from the corner of his eye but did not say anything. The fire was the only light in the room, and it threw moving shadows along the floor near where she sat. He could see the shape of her from where he was, her knees drawn up the way they always were. She was looking at the fire, not at him. The wood she had added caught properly, and the room was warmer along the floor. Outside, a branch scraped the roof once, and was quiet. He had sat like this before, in the evenings, but there had been no one on the floor by the fire. The room sounded different with someone else in it. For a while, neither of them said anything. He finished what was on his plate and set it aside. He got up and refilled his cup from the kettle and sat back down. The wind outside was building. He could hear it in the pine tops. "Cold tonight," he said. She looked at the fire. "Yes," she said. That was all. But it was the first time she had spoken inside the house, and the first time either of them had spoken without something needing doing. He sat with his cup for a while. He set it down. "My wife died," he said. He was looking at the table when he said it. 2 winters passed. I had built half of what was out there with her beside me. That's why there's only me here. She did not say anything right away. He had not expected her to. "I was running," she said, after a time. He waited. "There were men who had a claim on me. I don't know if the claim was legal. I was told it was. I left anyway. I was alone by then. There was no one left to go back to." She paused. "I walked for 8 days, mostly at night. I had the north in mind. I didn't know the trail went along the edge like that." He looked at her for the first time since she had sat down. She was looking at the fire. Her face was still, the way it was always still. He nodded. He did not ask about the men, or where she had been going, or how far she had come. She looked at the fire for a long time. Neither of them said anything. The wind came and went against the side of the house. After a while he pushed back from the table, went to his coat on the peg by the door, and took the ring out of the pocket. He came back and set it on the table between them. "Hers," he said. She got up from the floor and came to the table and picked it up. She turned it in her fingers the way he turned it, a plain band. Dark metal, worn smooth on the inner face. She held it for a long time and didn't say anything. He let her hold it. The fire settled. She turned it once more and looked at the inside of the band where the metal was worn the most. When she set it down, she set it closer to him. He picked it up and put it back in his pocket. It was not trust. Not yet. But it was not the careful distance of the first days either. It was the fire and the wind outside the walls, and 2 people who had each put something down on the table without the other one leaving the room. He had not had that in a long time. He did not think she had either. He did not say any of this out loud, and neither did she. He went to bed. She stayed by the fire. In the morning she was in the yard before him, already at work. 3 weeks passed. In that time, the east corner of the roof was repaired and done. The drainage channel along the north barn wall had been cleared, regraded, and covered with flat stone, so it would not silt up again. A second woodpile appeared against the back wall of the house, shorter than the first, but tight, the logs split to an even size and stacked against the prevailing wind. The kitchen garden was turned over and seeded for what the season still had left. The stone that had sat in the west field for as long as he had worked the ground was gone. The field was clear. The livestock, which had been skittish around her through the first week, were not skittish any more. The water trough no longer leaked at the base. The gate on the south pen swung clean, both ways. The fence post that had listed since the frost heave stood straight now and would hold through the season. The barn door hung level on its hinge. The yard had the same look it had always had, but there was more done in it, and it held differently. 2 sets of tasks finished where one had been left half done. The property looked like a place that intended to last. He had done careful work here in the years before, and it had been good work. The work of the last 3 weeks was something else. Some of it was work he could not have done alone. Some of it was work he had not thought to try. She had moved into the barn at some point in the 2nd week without either of them acknowledging it. He had come in one evening and found the floor near the fire empty, and in the morning she had been in the yard already. That was all. She was up before him most mornings. He had stopped noting this as a fact and started treating it as a given. The arrangement, as it was, had not required a word to settle. On a Wednesday in the middle of the 3rd week, a man on a horse came along the north road that ran above the property. He was not a close neighbor, more someone he recognized from the trading post. The man slowed at the crest where the road bent and had a long sight line down into the yard. She was splitting wood near the back wall. She stopped when she felt him looking and looked back. The man did not wave, did not call down. He sat his horse for a long time, looking at her, and then he put his heels to it and went. He had seen it from the shed doorway. She had seen it from the yard. Neither of them said anything about it. Neither of them needed to. He had moved the ring from his coat pocket to the windowsill above the sink sometime in that 2nd week, not from intention, just from habit shifting. One morning, he came in from the yard and found a small flat stone placed next to it. Pale, smooth, river-worn, the kind the creek bed threw up after a good rain. He did not know when she had put it there. She had not said anything. He had not asked. He did not move either thing. The word that had always come to mind when he thought about what this was had been arrangement. He was not sure when it had stopped fitting. Several weeks back, at least. He had not said so, and neither had she. No better word had come up. He thought about this sometimes while he was working, and then he stopped thinking about it and worked, which was the right answer for most things. Some things did not need a name to be real. There were 4 of them, coming out of the pines from the north. He was splitting wood at the back of the house when he saw them. He set the axe down without thinking about it. He did not pick up anything else. The morning was clear and cold. 4 orcs moving across the lower pasture toward the yard, unhurried, in a loose group, the tallest one slightly ahead. He stood where he was and waited. The light was still low in the pines. The frost from the night had not burned off yet. She was already in the yard. She had been tending the kitchen garden, and she straightened when she saw them, her back to him. For a moment she was very still. Then she turned and looked at him once, and then she walked to the gate and placed herself in the gap between him and where they were coming from. She stood there with her shoulders squared and her arms at her sides. She did not look back at him. She was not protecting him, exactly. She was making a statement about where she stood. The 4 stopped at the gate. 2 of them shifted slightly apart, 1 to each side, without any signal that he could see. Just a thing they did. There was an exchange between her and the tallest one, in the language that was hers and theirs, words he did not know. It was not quiet. It was not a fight. It had the sound of something that had been building and was now being said. She spoke for a while. The tall one listened. The others watched the yard without looking directly at him. When she was done, the tall one looked at him. Direct. Without hostility. Without warmth. He was being measured. He knew it, and he stood still for it. "Was it you?" the tall one said. Not quite a question. "On the cliff?" "Yes," he said. The tall one held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned back to the others, and there was a shorter exchange, quieter. He could not follow it, and did not try. The tall one turned back. "We will stay the night," she said. "There is room in the barn," he said. They came through the gate. That evening he brought out what he had, and they added what they had brought. And together, it was enough. She built the fire in the yard, and they gathered around it, all of them, himself included. The food was set in the middle without arrangement. People took what they reached. The yard smelled of wood smoke, and something they had brought that he did not recognize, a spice or a preparation he had no name for. He had not been sure what to expect. Something careful, perhaps, an arrangement held at distance. But she was not careful with them. She sat with her kin with the ease of people who had known each other over a long distance and a longer time. She talked. She looked at their faces. She laughed once, which he had not heard before. A short sound startled out of her. She was more at ease than he had ever seen her. It was good to see. He had not known, until that moment, how much of her had been held back. He ate and listened to what he could follow, which was not much, and watched what he could understand, which was more. The tall one checked on him at intervals in the way you check on something you are still deciding about. He did not mind. She had vouched for him without being asked to. That was what the tall one was still weighing. They did not treat him like a host. They did not treat him like a problem. They treated him like something at the edge of a thing he was not yet fully part of. That felt about right. The fire burned down. They stayed. A man came on a grey horse on a Tuesday morning, following the north road down to the property. He was not the man from before, not the neighbor who had slowed and stared. This man wore a coat with a brass button on the collar and carried a leather satchel across his saddle. He had the manner of a man accustomed to paper and travel in equal measure. He was not unkind-looking. He was not anything-looking. His face was a working face, the kind that collected information and moved on. He came through the gate the way a man comes through a gate when he has reason to, which is to say, he knocked on the post first, then came through without waiting for an answer. "Good morning," he said to the stranger. He did not say anything to her. She was at the water trough, filling a pail. She did not stop when he arrived. She did not turn around. She finished what she was doing and set the pail down and stood facing the trough with her arms at her sides. "Good morning," the stranger said. He was standing by the shed doorway, where he had been when he heard the knock. The man looked at her back for a moment. Then he looked at the stranger. "I am the land registrar for this district," he said. He produced a paper from the satchel and looked at it, then looked at the yard. His eyes moved the way a registrar's eyes move, cataloguing without necessarily approving or disapproving. The second woodpile, the repaired gate, the kitchen garden going in. This property is recorded as a single person holding. You're holding, I believe. "That's right," the stranger said. "How long has she been here?" the man asked. He said it without looking at her. 6 weeks, near enough. "And what is her standing? Free, bound, employed?" The stranger looked at him. "She is here," he said. "She is not a problem." The man held his pen above the paper for a moment, before writing. Then he wrote. He did not appear troubled by the answer. He did not appear pleased either. His face had the look of a man who had been asked to account for something he had not expected to find. "This would need to be noted," he said. "There are those who take an interest in such arrangements." "Note it then," the stranger said. The man looked at her one more time. She had not moved. She was still facing the trough, the pail at her feet. There was a quality to her stillness in those moments that the man registered in the way people register something they are not quite sure how to categorize. She was large. The pail at her feet was not a small pail. She had not moved toward him, and she had not moved away. The man seemed to understand that her silence was not the silence of something restrained. He wrote again, folded the paper, and put it back in the satchel. "Good day to you," he said. He touched the brim of his hat. "Good day," the stranger said. The man went back through the gate and mounted his horse and rode up to the north road. He took the bend at a walk, and then the sound of him was gone. The stranger stayed by the shed. He watched the road. He had not realized how tightly he had been holding himself until the quiet settled back in, and his shoulders came down without his deciding it. She turned around. She picked up the pail. "He will tell someone," she said. He looked at the road. "Yes," he said. They came 3 days after the registrar. There were 3 of them, on horses, riding in from the north road. The one in front was not the type to be at the front by accident. He was wide in the shoulders, well dressed for the region, with the kind of face that expected to be listened to. The 2 behind him were younger, and did not say anything, which was their function. The stranger had been patching a section of the back roof when he heard them coming. He came down the ladder and walked out to the center of the yard. He did not go toward them. He let them come to him. She had already stopped what she was doing when she heard the horses. She was near the barn. She stayed there. The man came through the gate without knocking. "Morning," he said. He was looking at the stranger. He knew she was there. He had been told, but he did not look at her yet. He took in the yard first, the repaired gate, the second woodpile, the cleaned drainage along the barn. He had expected something different, perhaps. He took a moment to finish taking it in. "I represent a number of landholders in this district. There's a concern I've been asked to raise." "Raise it," the stranger said. The man looked at her then. She was near the barn, a fence post in one hand. She had been working. She did not set the post down. She watched the man with the flat attention she gave to things she was deciding the nature of. "She needs to leave," the man said. He said it to the stranger. "There's no settled right for her kind here. The registrar noted an unregistered arrangement. That's not a legal position." "What's the specific claim?" the stranger said. "What paper? What rule?" The man had been expecting to name a rule and have it acknowledged. That was how these conversations usually went. The question caught him a beat behind. "There are community standards," he said. "There's a concern among the landholders about who settles in this district and under what terms. Your registrar filed a report." "My registrar," the stranger said. "What paper? What rule?" The man looked at her again. She had not moved. The fence post was still in her hand, held at her side, at about the height where a person's head would be. She was not raising it. She was not threatening anything with it. She was simply holding it and looking at the man, and the man kept needing to account for this. He moved his gaze back to the stranger, then to her, then back. He was keeping track of the yard. "I can bring more people," he said. "There are those with the authority to conduct a formal removal. I'm giving you the chance to handle this before it comes to that. You've noted your position," the stranger said. "So have I." The man looked back at his companions, 2 younger men on horses, waiting, then back at the yard, the stranger in the center, her near the barn with the fence post, the property looking like a place that intended to last. He had come expecting a certain kind of room and found it arranged differently, and the arithmetic was not what he had walked in with. His jaw moved once, slowly, the way a man's jaw moves when he has arrived at something and doesn't like it. "I'll be back," he said. "All right," the stranger said. The man turned his horse, The two behind him turned theirs. They went up to the north road without looking back. The stranger stood in the center of the yard and watched until the sound of the horses was gone. He watched the road a while after that. She set the post down. Neither of them spoke. The yard was quiet in the way it gets when something has just left it and the air hasn't settled yet. The kin had come back 2 days before. There was no particular reason given, which was reason enough. She had met them at the gate the morning they returned, and there had been a short exchange, and then they were there the way weather is there. The tall one slept in the barn. The other 3 took different parts of the property. The stranger had noticed and said nothing and come inside when the light failed. He had not asked why they were back. It seemed like the wrong question. On the morning of the 3rd day, he heard horses on the north road. More than 3 this time. The man from before came through the gate first. He had brought more people, 6 behind him, some on horseback and some on foot, with the look of men who had been told this would be an easy job. They stopped when they saw the yard. The stranger was standing in the center of the yard, where he had stood the last time. She was to his right, a step back. The tall one was behind her. The other 3 spread across the yard in the positions they had taken without being arranged into them. He had not arranged any of it. It had simply been where everyone was standing when the horses came through the gate. 6 on the outside. More than that on the inside. The man from before had not expected what was inside. He stopped his horse just past the gate. The men behind him pulled up. Nobody said anything. The yard was quiet. The wind moved in the pines. No one on either side spoke. No one moved. The man from before looked at the stranger. The stranger looked back. The man's eyes moved across the assembled group, counting something. He looked at the tall one. She did not look away. He looked at the other 3. He looked at the fence line, and the barn, and the woodpile, and the gate he had just come through. He looked at the stranger again. The silence held. It went on longer than silences usually do, between people who are deciding something. The stranger's hands were at his sides. He was not holding anything. He was not performing anything either. He was simply standing in his yard. The man from before looked at the people behind him, 8 including himself. Then he looked back at the yard. Something moved across his face. Not fear, exactly, but the recognition that this was a different kind of ground than he had expected. The arithmetic he had walked in with didn't hold. The property he had come to find had more in it than he had been told, and the people in it had a stillness that was not the stillness of people who were afraid. He sat his horse for a long time. "We'll settle this another way," he said. No one answered. He turned his horse. The men behind him turned or stepped aside. They went back through the gate, single file, and up to the north road. Nobody in the yard moved until the sound of the horses was gone from the road, and the road was quiet, and the pines were quiet, and there was nothing left to listen for. Then the tall one said something to the other 3 in their language, and the other 3 moved, and there was no ceremony in it. The stranger looked at her. She was looking at the gate where the man had gone. He went inside and put water on. She came in after a while and sat near the fire. The kettle began. He could hear the others in the yard through the wall, the low sounds of the property going back to its work. One of the others came inside for a moment, said something to her and went back out. The yard settled. The property held. Nobody celebrated. There was nothing to celebrate that would not have been celebrating too early. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came in through the south first, following the creek, and then in the kitchen garden, where the ground they had turned before, the frieze now held green against the brown. Then everywhere at once. the way spring comes when it finally decides. The mornings changed. The air was different. Things wanted to grow. She was in the garden when he came out most mornings. That had become the ordinary way of it. She worked the ground in the early light before the frost was fully off it, which was its own kind of thing he had come to trust. The two of them worked the property through the thaw, each taking a different part of it, and what came together from that was visible in the way that labor made visible over months always is. The east corner of the roof had held through every freeze and thaw. The drainage along the barn had not silted. The second woodpile, built through the cold months, was used down to the last log by the time the warmth came in, and the new one being put up in its place was already taller. The gate on the south pen swung clean and had all winter. The livestock were healthy. The kitchen garden was going in for the second time, larger than the first. He walked the property one morning in the first week of the thaw and looked at what the winter had taken and what had held. More had held than he had started the winter expecting. One morning he came inside from the yard and noticed the ring was no longer on the windowsill. He stood for a moment. Then he looked to the stove, and there it was, set inside the small clay bowl they used for salt, the one that lived near the heat, set down there the way you set something down when you mean for it to stay. The pale stone she had placed beside it on the windowsill was gone. She had taken it with her when the kin left. He stood at the bowl for a moment, then went back to what he was doing. He did not pick the ring up. Over the winter he had thought sometimes about what word fit this. Arrangement had stopped being accurate by the second month. Something closer to partnership, maybe. But that word implied terms that had never been spoken aloud. It was something older and less tidy than any of the words he reached for, the kind of thing that forms when people have pulled each other back from the edge and stayed after. Not quite a family. That word was too small. She said something to him at the table one morning, something plain about the south field and the seed. He answered. They both got up and went out and did the thing. There was no name for that either. There was just the field and the work and the morning around them. From the top of the east field you could see the north road clearly. The man who had said they would settle this another way had not come back through the spring. The quiet had held. But one morning, from up there, he counted 4 riders at the crest where the road bent, looking down at the property for a long time. The same crest the neighbor had stopped at the autumn before. He watched them. She had stopped working and was watching too. Then they moved on. The world beyond the fence had not finished moving, but the property held. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much. Channel name.